Okay. So make sure you've got a little bit of room around you. You can bump into any furniture or anything like that. And just stand in. Feet are hip width apart and parallel. If you have if you have a slight angle outwards, that shouldn't be a problem, but try not to make it too much. Part of the idea is to orientate yourself so that toes are pointing forwards, knees are pointing forwards, hips, shoulders, etc., or everything's going in the same direction, as it were, not just in the front, but all around. Weight a little bit forwards, and you've been following last few weeks, I've been talking about this slight sense of feeling the releasing in the hips. When you do that, there's a kind of accompanying it is a softening in your knees, so they curve slightly. And also, you'll probably feel some kind of releasing upwards towards your back and the shoulders. And try and keep your attention in that area of your hips and begin to turn. And as you turn, just feel the movement again going up your body, into your ribs, and then into your shoulders. And because your arms are just hanging down, the weight of your arms, you're not trying to do anything with your arms. You're not trying to move them. You're not trying to stop them moving. So they just swing round, and you can see it's fairly regular once you've got this going where your arms move. And obviously there's a difference between people and height and that kind of thing, but proportionally arms are about the same length in everybody, which means that if you're doing this correctly, come a little bit closer so you can see. You see where my hands are falling across my hips. If they're up here somewhere, then at some point you'll be lifting your hands. And from behind, then when we do this, you see where my hand falls across this part of my back where my spine goes into my pelvis. And again, if they're up here somewhere or anything like that, you're putting extra effort into your arms to try and place them somewhere. It's not that we wouldn't do that in Tai Chi, just we don't do it in this exercise. And so we get used to the feeling in our upper body, and it follows what happens in our center, and not so much in this exercise, but in other exercises. Also, where the weight is moving to from foot to foot. We'll look at that in a few moments. So anything we do with our arms, any shape we create, any posture we take with our arms, is cultivated out of this. So this is a sort of base feeling. It's by no means the end of the story, but it is the necessary starting point. And just be aware that I think almost all of us will tend to pay more attention to our arms than to our feet and our hips. And what we want to try and do is to reverse that. It's not that the arms are unimportant, but it's a question of when we give them the importance. And in all of the movements, in one way or another, and in some it's very clear, in others it's a bit more obscure, the generating movement, if you like, comes from our feet and our legs, comes from the ground. So now, with this movement, we're going to create a shape with the arm, and it's important that we create a shape that doesn't create tightness and stiffness. So turn your hands palm out, elbows are slightly bent, and just raise your hands up to a comfortable height. I'm going to go back to my things are disappearing. Your hands shouldn't come above shoulder height. When they get close to that, then you'll find that your elbows are hanging down. Of course, if your arms are lower down, if it's not comfortable up there, if they're lower down, then your elbows will be higher, but they remain curved. And so what we start to get here is a quality of movement that has as part of it this feeling that we had earlier, but also has a sense of structure to it. What we don't want to do is to have the structure without that initial feeling. And then drop your hands down. Now turn one foot out, put the other foot forwards, moving the weight fairly rapidly and letting your body turn with that. The most natural way for your body to turn will be towards the direction that your feet are pointing. We're front-facing creatures after all. And you may find you're turning the other way. If you are, don't worry about that. It's not going to affect what I say next. Because now we're turning in the center of the body, and that should be a very natural outcome in whichever direction you're turning in of the movement of your weight. We would tend to face that direction. And so what we want to try and do is get that sense of almost a bouncing movement from the legs. And again, our arms simply follow that. And if you look there in the front and from the back, my hands are actually falling in the same part of onto the same part of my body that they did earlier in the initial exercise, because nothing has changed in the upper part of the body. It's still sitting on our hips, and it's just that the weight is moving, so we're alternating from one leg to another. And then have your other foot forwards. Make sure you keep the width of your step. You can see the background just about between my legs. So it would be if I could turn the just a bit more light. That's better. You can see that a bit more. Nice steady rhythm in all of these initial movements is a good thing to focus on, because if you can find that rhythm, then it's something that your body resonates and connects with. And shake out. So no exercise is ever one-dimensional in Tai Chi. Those initial exercises will help to raise body temperature. They'll get our heart beating a little bit, so it's just mildly aerobic. So serve some of the functions of a classic kind of exercise warm-up. And at the same time, they also give us a way into understanding some of the really crucial properties that we're going to be working with in all of these exercises. So come back to the parallel stance. And I'm going to exaggerate this. If I bring my weight forwards, at this point, I'm almost falling forwards. So I've gone too far, really. My calves are tight. What we will often do in a situation like this is we'll pull our shoulders back to try and stop ourselves falling forward. You see now I've sort of bent my back and so on and so forth. What we want to try and do is to again let the hips drop back as though we were just sitting on the edge of a table. And again, it's only a very slight movement, but it's this feeling of releasing through hips and lower back. So our body comes upright. No one's suggesting here that our spine should be straight, our back should be straight, but we have an imaginary center line here. And then just allowing your hips to drop back a little bit more and pushing up. Yeah, they're coming closer. This movement shows us one of the most basic patterns of movement of energy in the body, which is that we yield to the center of gravity, to the pull of gravity. Our center of gravity drops. We root down. And then at a certain point, as though our legs were made of springs, we get pushed up again. And then before everything tightens up and we lock up, we go down again. So by finding a good posture and listening to the pull of gravity as it works through our body and yielding to it, we learn to root down, which gives us a greatly more stable posture. We also initiate the upward movement. So that feeling of releasing in our hips, lower back, buttocks, whether or not we're actually actively sinking or not, will always be there. The feeling of yielding is a constant background to everything that we do, because gravity is the major force that we have to work with when we're working solo. And bring your hands around so you're cradling the ball, push up, and as you reach the top, feel the expansion in your upper body, pushing your elbows out, drawing your hands up. Sink down, and as your shoulders drop down, it draws your hands, draw your hands down. And I said earlier about the rhythm of the movement. It's still there. Before it was the rhythm between left and right and forwards and back. Now it's the rhythm between expansion and contraction. It's usually more difficult to detect that rhythm and to work with that rhythm when we go slowly. Imagine you've got a ball under your arms and you're trying to just push the ball down into water. And looking for that feeling of rooting down. The exercise is called rooting down. Nice and easy and gently. Keep the movement in your legs, but let some of your attention rest in your back, your belly, your chest, your shoulders, so that you can begin to feel the responsiveness of your body as the movement, the energy begins to flow more freely. Trying to just look for that feeling of releasing, of softening in those areas that are perhaps a bit resistant to the movement. There's generally a few around, in my experience. So that gradually we get that sense of the rhythm and the flow through the whole of our body. And trying to keep our attention resting on that rhythm. Inevitably, our thoughts drift away and we stand here and we suddenly realize we've been thinking about something quite different. Everybody experiences that. What we learn to do in Tai Chi is when we notice that, our automatic response is to bring our attention back. And that way, it means that we're constantly using those nerve roots, patterns, the nervous system within the body that light up when we bring our attention inwards. So it can be quite an advantage to lose attention because you get to practice bringing it back once again. And this is one of the key sources of that very still, calm quality that we begin to associate with the practice. One of the great benefits of the practice, in my experience. Now from here, turn your hands palm out, push up. Another way that we might engage our attention is by using various images. This exercise is called the wild goose. So we have this image of a graceful bird in flight. Just be aware though, if the image distracts you, you start thinking, oh, I like geese and they make this lovely sound, and suddenly your attention is miles away. It ceases to be a useful rhythm. a useful image. So unlike those practices where we may use an image to take us away from where we are on some kind of guided journey, they can be very effective practices. In a way, we're doing the opposite with Tai Chi. We're actively trying to bring our attention in, but to bring with it some of the qualities that the image may have offered us. And then this time when you sink down, let your hands cross in front of your belly, push up. Just a smooth circle, it's not a stretch, you know, so my elbows are still bent here. This is called parting the clouds. So the image here that I quite like is, you can imagine on a very grey, cloudy day, suddenly the sun comes out and we get that lovely feeling of opening up, of expansion, both inside and out. And this is what we look for at that higher part of the movement. And that feeling of just almost on a cellular level, expanding and contracting. One more time. And then, and once again, feeling the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. With the next expansion, pushing one arm up, just a little above your head, elbow still bent. Rotate your arm and pull down. This is called Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. And we change from side to side slowly. Don't rush to change over. So it's almost like you're going to pluck something very delicate off the branch of a tree, a leaf or soft fruit or something. You just wrap your fingers around, keeping a hollow in the middle, and then rotate, drop your hips and let your elbow follow your hips down. Move your attention to the opposite side and push up. And again. One more on each side. As we go through the different movements, you may just find that there are parts of your body that feel a bit too tight. Go very gently, don't try and push through them. Rather have this feeling that you're trying to get the movement to flow over and around them and gradually wear them down. Now, bring your hands to your sides and then the hips still sinking back. For these next couple of exercises, we don't actually go up and down, but we do keep this feeling of our hips dropping back. It can feel as though buttocks, hips, lower back are overhanging. If you ever sat on top of a fence or a gate, you'll be familiar with that feeling. What we would do in those circumstances, of course, is we would angle forward slightly, otherwise we're going to fall over backwards. What happens here, and again, I'm going to exaggerate, is that if you see how my pelvis is tilted forwards, as I sink down, I sit and this happens. See, it's here, the pelvis will do this. It's sometimes said that the tail of the spine should tuck under, which it will do, but don't interpret that as meaning you have to actively tuck it under. It does it quite naturally and without you having to interfere. So we've still got that sense of yielding in our hips. So there will still be a sense of a push up here. Bring the hands around in front of you, let that movement upwards. Push your hands up, nice long feeling in your back and your hands slightly in front of your body, not pulled back like that. And then slowly down, rest by your sides. And again, pushing up. And we can alternate that with the sideways push. You lift your hands again and they push out. You come back, down, slightly out to the hips, and then beginning again. Taking the time to really come back to the starting position. Alternating between the two directions. You may find that you speed up on that return in movement. It's quite common. Just recognize that and make sure you take the time to complete each stage. Now this time, as you push your hands out, once again, turn a little bit in your hips. Pushing your hands out, bring them back in, turn to the front. Turn, push out the other way, and back. So now we've got 4 moves, all starting from this position here. You start by pushing your hands up, so pushing in 4 directions for obvious reasons, and all the way back. That's 1. 2, you push out and you start to turn a little bit and back. Notice if at this point you're kind of trying to speed up. There's the moment of resting here. And then 3, turning the other way and back. And that split second of resting, stillness. And then 4, facing the front. And push out and back. The 4 stages from the same starting point. 1, don't rush ahead. 2, 3, and 4. And again, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. One more round. Bring your hands down, and once again, let them hang down. And once again, as we pick up on that upward movement that comes as a consequence of the yielding to the pull of gravity, we let it push one arm out, let it curve up and around. Fingers drawn back slightly and then straight down. So imagine a line going down through your body, a half circle. Pull out. Notice that my fingers have curved out, so the palm of my hand facing out as much as I can without straining. And it's almost like I'm standing beneath the archway of an old church door or something like that. I reach out and I press against the arch and I slide my hand around until it gets above my head. Now, if that feels comfortable, you can add something in next time. If it doesn't, just carry on doing it this way. But when your hand gets to here, you can turn just a little bit and down. Just be aware if you make that turn that you could be sort of pulling on your shoulder or your hip or your back. So go nice and carefully. This is not meant to be a competition. And then change to the other side. Again, registering any difference between one side of your body and another. And again, this time, if it's going to be comfortable for you, turning. Think of the quality of the movement. It should feel like you're receiving a massage on the inside of your body. It's more, it's not a stretch or a strain that we would normally associate with exercising. Much softer feel than that. And again, just thinking about hips, legs. As we do this, as we did earlier, sinking down and pushing up, our pelvis stays more or less level. There may be some slight adjustments, but just in general terms. And when we think about the relationship, the connection between our hips and our shoulders, you can see when the pelvis is level, there's less need to kind of twist up in our back or whatever. But this time, if you watch, I push my hips back and that will send my head and shoulders forwards. I'm doing this quite big to exaggerate it, so be careful with your knees and your back. Then I let my hips drop back and that brings my head upright and I push up. What I don't want to do here is to strain in my shoulders or my neck to kind of pull myself up. It's like I'm just sitting back in a chair. So imagine that you're just about to sit into your favorite armchair. There's almost a sense of flopping back. We're going to use this action for 2 movements. So go nice and easy on your knees and on your back. And then this time, push up, your arms following, a little bit like the wild goose, but then as your hips go back, so your arms follow. This is called rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. And then another variation using the same action in our hips, hands in front of your belly. Turn horizontally, first of all, push back, swing around. And then notice how you're using the center of your body. This is called polishing the table. Your arms extending gently, not tight in your elbows or your shoulders. They're being guided by that movement in your center, your hips, your waist, the pelvis. Do one more in each direction. And then this time, just let your hands drop down and feel the weight of your arms, hips dropping back a little bit, soft in your knees. Just see how this posture feels. And then give your legs a little bit of a shake. Good. So a couple of things that can occur to us out of those exercises. One is that I said about not overextending your arms. So dragon plucks the stars from the sky is here, not here. One of the characteristics of this basic posture that we take, and again, it's a characteristic we want to find in all the postures and in all the movements, is that there's a certain amount of space within the body for movement. Tai Chi is an art that tries to generate movement both internally and externally. Externally with the shapes, the choreography of the movement. Internally with the sense of flow, the sense of energy. And so we always want to leave a little bit of space for that movement. It's like if you're wearing a pair of shoes and they're just big enough, you can't move your toes around or anything like that. But if they're a little bit bigger, once they've worn in, then you've got a bit more space. Your feet are more comfortable, and that flow of movement, that flow of energy, and its cultivation is one of the long-term aims in Tai Chi, as it is in Chinese medicine. So we say that sometimes we go to 80% of the full movement. Stretching is a good thing to do, by the way. And I do stretch as part of my own practice, and I think it's an important thing to do. But the concern here is with that movement, both externally and perhaps more importantly, internally. The second thing that comes out of that is the significance of this central part of our body. When I turn, my arms move. When I turn the other way, my arms move the other way. When I tilt forward, they go forward, and so on and so forth. And this part of the body becomes increasingly important. It's the center, sometimes referred to as the lower dantian, that is the part of the body that's really dropping towards the ground. It's the center that picks up on that rhythm of the movement, the contraction, the expansion, the yielding, the pushing up, however you think of it, and gives it some kind of purpose. So it's the center that we focus our attention through, that we focus our intention through, and any kind of image and so on and so forth. So I mentioned earlier that we're training our attention to come back into our body. That has an effect on the nervous system, and it actually gets very specific. The part of the body that we bring our attention back to, and this becomes an habitual process in Tai Chi, is to the center of our body with the intention that the center part of our body feels as though it's dropping to the ground, rooting down. And this is just an ongoing thing in the back of our minds. If we think about it during certain of the exercises, and this takes us back to that very first exercise, then actually if we practice on a regular basis, then it will just become second nature for for you to do that. We know that our nervous system responds to repetition and practice, just as muscle responds to repetition and practice, if we're, say, trying to develop the strength of the muscles. So two things. One is don't over move, and don't go for stretching at this point. You know, if you want to do a little stretch after the class, that's fine. I would recommend it. And the second thing is get to be very familiar with this area, really between your hips and pelvis and your waist, and practice bringing your attention back there. Not only a physical response that we're looking for, but we begin to associate this with a sense of stillness, with a sense of calmness, as something that can be reliable for us to move from. So literally, we're moving with a sense of being centered. So we're going to continue this thing, and we're going to change the stance. I'm just going to illustrate something with a couple of little sticks. If I put these on the floor, get them, that'll do. Probably a little bit. So if I'm standing with my feet hip width apart, you can see one of the advantages of this, I'm probably a little bit too wide, but don't worry about it, is that actually I've got plenty of space to rest on. If I'm standing like this, I'm kind of bouncing on the pole and it all gets a bit wobbly. Even without the pole there, it would get a little bit wobbly. So it's important to get the stance correct, because if we want all these things like the flow of the energy and all the rest of that stuff to actually work, we have to have a good structure. Now, we're going to change the posture to the forward posture. I turn one foot out, so you can turn your left foot out, mirror my movements. Now, this is an angle that we might choose to play around with. It's never going to be a huge angle, but you know, exactly where it's comfortable in the end is a very personal thing. And then I move my weight in. Now I'm going to step forward with my other foot to there. And you can see I've kept the width of the step. So what I don't want to do, and again, this is very common, is get to here and then step there. Once again, I'm sort of like straddling the pole and I'm wobbling around. So hip width across our feet. Those before I flip over them. So that's really important for the next few exercises. If your body feels stable, then there's going to be less tightness and less tension. And it's unavoidable that if we feel a bit wobbly, we will begin to stiffen up. It's a natural response on the part of our body. We're not so much trying to override that as we are looking for alternative pathways. And so what we're doing in the first instance is finding the structure. And we end up with a step that is probably going to be shorter and wider than our normal step. Now just begin to transfer your weight forwards and backwards. Try and keep the angle of your upper body facing straight ahead. But if you do find there's a slight angle there, whatever the direction, don't strain to correct it. If you've been doing this for a while, you may be able to correct it. But there's usually a reason for that. So if, say, for instance, my body's a bit like this, it may be a bit stiff in my hips, my knees, my back. But if I simply do this, you can see when I do that, see how my legs are coming around and things like that. So if you are a bit offline, it's not going to be the end of the world at this stage. We want to work towards the precision, and it's important to respect how strong these exercises are. And they go quite deep into the body, so we don't want to start straining. From the side, you can see here, it's not a long step. And when you go forwards, give yourself a moment on the front leg to rest. Make sure you're not overextending your knee. See where my knee is above the ball of my foot. And when you go back, once again, don't twist the knee up and give yourself a moment to rest. So don't worry this. Try and keep your hips and your pelvis level. This is a hugely important exercise. It's a fundamental exercise for anybody who wishes to develop Tai Chi as an art, but it's also an exercise that brings almost immediate benefits in terms of our stability, because we're trying to move without coming up, so our center of gravity stays low. So we maintain good posture while we're in movement. Which means that we're less likely to stiffen up while we're moving. We're going to be more stable as we move along. We're also going to be conditioning legs. If you have trouble with your knees, go carefully with this exercise, but recognize it can be done without tightening the knees. That makes it very strong on the muscles of our legs, but it is very good for the joints. So we can begin to get, again, that sense of energy flowing through the joints. Now this time, when you go into your back leg, settle down and just gently raise your front toes. You'll find more of your weight goes into the foot. Go forward. You can have the front foot very slightly turned out here because you want more weight to go down into that foot. You push the back knee forwards and your heel comes up. So we gradually get more and more of our weight flowing down through the supporting leg. The terms that we would use to describe these in Tai Chi is that the leg carrying the majority of the weight is the full leg, the other is the empty leg. And what we want to do is to get to a point where, say here, the front leg is the empty leg, and it's relatively straightforward, just to bring the foot in and then step forward, back to the original position and forwards, and then in and back out, back leg. We talk about planting the foot, not just stepping. So we're very careful with the step. We pay attention to that. And this is key because we often don't think about where we're putting our feet unless we're walking somewhere where there's hazards on the ground. But if you plant something, if you plant a bulb or something in your garden, you don't just idly chuck it down. You actually choose where it's going to go. You're careful about positioning it. You sort of take care of it. And shake out. One of the lovely things I think about Tai Chi is the way that we pay really close attention to what are actually everyday acts. You know, lifting the arm up to get something off a shelf, taking a step. And yet there's so much going on that we take for granted quite often in those movements. And the act of paying attention has benefits physically, but also, once again, mentally, in terms of drawing our attention more deeply in, reinforcing, cultivating this sense of stillness, this sense of calmness. That is as much one of the benefits of the art as the physical exercise. So from the parallel stance, turn out and then step forwards. Begin to transfer your weight. In the end, in Tai Chi, we wouldn't make a distinction between mind and body. This is not sort of trying to force our body into doing anything. It's not mind over matter. But it seems to me that it's where what we think of as mind in all its aspects, not just thinking, but feeling and emotions and so on. So not just mind, but also the body overlap. And it's in that area that Tai Chi will work. And it's in that area that Tai Chi will influence both mind and body. And then as you come back, you draw your toes up, step more in to the back foot. Be careful when you do this that you're not tightening your knees in particular. It's a very common habit. Remember, we look for that sense of a flow downwards through our knees. That will become easier with practice, partly because the muscles of the legs will actually be working harder. It's the muscles that support the joint, not the other way around. And then bring the foot in. If stability is an issue for you, this exercise, and any of them really, could be done, say, next to a wall, which means that I wouldn't have my hand on the wall the whole time. If I get to here and I wobble around, you're probably going to stiffen up. And when we stiffen up, we're not dropping our center of gravity. So if I was there, I'll put my hand on the wall, use it for a little bit of confidence to enable that sense of releasing in the hip and step in. And if you do that, gradually you'll begin to find that your confidence in these these things improves. But take your time. Notice I'm not just going doing this. I'm going forwards, I'm settling as I raise my back heel. I'm bringing the foot in, I put the toes down. Is my posture okay? And feel out with the front. And then, depending on which direction you've got space in, step through. When you go forwards, your heel goes down, and then your toes, and then you move your weight, like you're walking on thin ice. You want to test the ice like this before you commit the weight, because if you just drop into this, you could go through. If you're going backwards, the same thing is true, but you would put the ball of the foot down first. And then change in direction if you haven't done so already. So here you see the ball of my foot goes down, then my heel, and then I go back. Do you feel what's behind you or in front of you through the sole of your foot? Another example might be if you were sort of paddling in the sea, maybe in a pair of shorts or something like that. You don't want to plunge in, so you're very careful about how you place your foot. And then bring a few power. Give your legs a shake. Once again, paying attention to something that is quite common, but thinking about it. Have your right foot forwards. Now, start with your weight in your back foot. Push forwards. And as you settle into the front foot, let your hands swing through. It's called fisherman castanet. Most of the time, your hands are following your shoulders. It's only when you set off in the leg that they go a little bit further. But even then, there's a limit to how far they can move without straining. You're not, remember, we're not sort of contriving anything with our hands. And notice there's a natural curve. Here, from here, my hand will drop down to its fall downwards as it hangs behind the shoulder, and it will just swing up again. I'm not trying to lift my hands. This time, when you go from the front leg, turn in the direction of the back foot, so that brings your hands across your body. Same idea, hands are following your shoulders, shoulders following your hips and your weight. And this time, as they sweep back, let them come up a little bit higher, no higher than your shoulders. Go forwards and turn. Draw your hands down across your hips, and then up a little bit and down, creating a kind of sideways figure of eight. The movement is created primarily with the movement of your weight and the turn in the center, complemented by that feeling of rhythm, of expansion and contraction in the upper part of your body, and the feeling of your arms following that rhythm of expansion and contraction. Then your left foot forwards, turn your right foot out, step forwards, fisherman castanet. Lose touch with what's happening in your feet and your legs, hips, and the movement of your weight. Think of that as being like the background, like in a band where the drums and the bass, and the rhythm section are constantly there. It may not be the most attractive thing, the most immediately obvious thing, but if it wasn't there, you'd soon know it. This time turning. Feeling where there are patterns in your body of expansion and contraction. Which parts of your body are expanding here? Which parts are contracting here? And so on. And then the figure of 8. You're on the back leg and your arms won't go forwards until your body goes forwards and then you turn. So your legs and your center lead the movement, not the other way around. I'm going to turn my front foot out, you can as well. This time as I turn and my hands come up, I'm going to bring my back foot in. You can go backwards with this as well. Stepping forwards and down. Same thing again, bring the back foot in. So combining this figure of 8 exercise with the step in. This time, I feel it's appropriate, I'm going to raise my knee. I'm going to run out of space in a minute, so next time I'm going to take the step back. I'm going in a straight line because that keeps me in camera, but you might choose to do a slight diagonal if there's something on the floor behind you or something. Just think about where you're going to place the empty leg. One more time. And bring your feet parallel. Good. Now, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face, nice and light. Use the pads of your fingers. Work up over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. And then light on your back. Just as much of your back as you can comfortably cover. Down the outside of your legs. Up the inside. Coming up your body, first of all, lightly on your belly. And then on the upper part of your chest. Now, coming back to the basic stance and the last exercise brings us back to this idea of rooting down. It's called Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. Sinking down and then pushing up and feeling the pull on your hips and your shoulders, drawing your hands in and then back, and finally down. And then once again, from the bottom, expanding outwards. The hands come around as though they're going to hold a ball against your chest. Then your elbows. A nice, calm, settled feeling, particularly in that last stage. One more round. And just stand for a moment. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Keep your legs a shake. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. But other than that, around here we've got a nice sunny day, so hopefully that is for you as well. Okay. So thanks very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Cheers.
Bye.